Good morning, friends. I welcome you to the 7th NUCD virtual conference, and this is a thematic conference. And today is the first session, and you have already heard Dr. Jayant Panda. Now, on the theme of clinical trials in diabetes, we are going to interact with one of the best brains in India who has largest experience on clinical trials, doing the trials, analyzing them and publishing papers. He is none other than Dr. Awadhesh Kumar Singh, and all of you know him. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Yeah, there are a lot of papers to his credit, and there are textbook editor of William textbook. He has for Southeast Asia edition. He is the editor. Welcome, Dr. Awadhesh, to this NUCD this edition.
Thank you for the invite, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. You are a busy man. It's a pleasure to get you. I like to, for the benefit of our audience, I would like to hear from you what is clinical trial and when it started in world and when it started in India.
Well, so when it comes, so we are focusing on clinical trials in diabetes, and I will stick my discussions to clinical trial in type 2 diabetes, because otherwise I will take entire day on clinical trials as a whole. Well, so the story goes back to, safety of anti-diabetic drugs in early, 60s, 70s, when the UGDP started with using older first generation anti-diabetic drug, tolbutamide, and there was some concern of increase in death was seen with the tolbutamide in the UGTP. So this trial was further, done in the form of UKPDS trial now, that started in 1977 and continued for first 10 years of randomized fashion and the next 10 years of the observational studies. In UKPDS trial, so was one of the large anti-diabetic safety trial, you can say, for anti-diabetes drug in type 2 diabetics. And for the first time, we learned that treating diabetes can reduce the microvascular complications of diabetes at risk. There are a lot of issues in UKPDS trial, and I'm not going into those nitties and gritties of UKPDS trial. However, after the UKPDS trial, several other trials was further conducted to understand whether intensively lowering the blood glucose does anything good in progression of diabetes complications, and therefore 3 other trials was conducted called ACCORD, ADVANCE, and BADT. You all are aware. The difference between ACCORD, ADVANCE, and BADT was, from the UKPDS, that it was conducted in patients with a longer duration of diabetes, and HbA1c target in the intensive arm was much more steeper compared to the UKPDS trial. And, in contrast to the UKPDS trial, there was no benefit seen in the intensive arm in the ACCORD, ADVANCE, and BADT compared to the conventional arm. In fact, ACCORD trial was stopped prematurely because of increase in death in patients of intensive control arm. There are several reasons why there was increase in death, because there was a sudden abrupt lowering of blood glucose in older people that led to increase in cardiovascular death. But all these 3 trials taught us few things. UKPDS taught us that if you control blood glucose intensively, you reduces the microvascular complications of diabetes. The ACCORD, ADVANCE, BADT taught us that if you too much intensively control the blood glucose, you might end up in a trouble. So both the trial taught us go to control diabetes, but go it gently. To keep the target HbA1c to the moderate level. Don't go too much low, otherwise you will produce harm. And also from these 4 trials, we learned that reducing macrovascular complications of diabetes is not easy. And you need something different tool, not only the sugar control, but also the other risk factor control, as we learned in the STENO-2 trial. The STENO-2 trial looked not only for the glucose control, but for the diabetes, for the dyslipidemia, and suggested that it's not only glucose that matters in diabetic patient, it's blood pressure, it's cholesterol that also matters a lot when you want to reduce the macrovascular complications, the heart complications of diabetes, and therefore several other trials conducted, and I will come into the next session of discussion.
Right. In India, these global clinical trials also take place. Many investigators are also involved. Government of India has they have a department which controls clinical trials in India. How do you find the environment in India for clinical trials?
Well, so earlier it was not bad, I can tell you. So because I was the part of some of those CB outcome trial, and initial in initial part of in 2015 to 2020, it wasn't that much difficult to conduct a trial. But later on, perhaps I don't know what actually happened in reality. But then somehow government of India was not very keen to continue with the randomized control trial. But that's not a great step. In the evolving medicine, in the evolving medical science, you need to conduct trials. Without trial, you cannot guarantee efficacy and safety of the drug. It's unfortunate that it's very difficult to conduct a trial in the Indian setting, and I would urge the concerned authority, they should allow us to have a smooth conduction of trials in India, because we are the almost second or largest diabetes population in the world, just after the China. And if you don't allow us to conduct the trial, how could we develop research and in any progress in the field of diabetes in this part of the world? So yes, it is unfortunate that it's very difficult to conduct the trial currently, but I'm sure the government would be keen to allow us to conducting trial in the future.
Dr. Singh, as we know, on the phase 3 and 4, human beings are involved. Clinical trial on human beings, volunteers or actual patients are involved. So what is the safety limit or guidance by the government of India? Are they restricting now because of human safety factors?
I don't know that's the reason, but then see, even over the years, these trials design is getting changed. Remember, even if you see the FDA now, FDA is not asking to conduct a cardiovascular outcome trial as it was mandated in 2008. In 2007, there was one paper with rosiglitazone which came out in New England Journal of Medicine suggesting that rosiglitazone is increasing MI, although we use rosiglitazone for 9 years, and then suddenly one fine morning we come to know that this drug increases MI. Now, the FDA, at that point of time, mandated that all anti-diabetic drugs now onward has to conduct a cardiovascular safety outcome trial to show that these drugs are safe, and certain criteria was laid down to prove that these drugs are safe. Now over since the 2008 to 2020, for the last 12 years, several CB outcome trials were conducted. Now if you look back in the last 12 years, what happened? Majority of these trial find means almost all the trial find that these newer anti-diabetic drugs are safe. Some shown even a benefit, but all of them shown a neutral cardiovascular outcome. So none of the anti-diabetic drugs so far since the 2008 to 2020 shown any wrong cardiovascular signal. Okay, except maybe that in some case in severtimi we found increase in heart failure with sexagliptin. Apart from this finding, all the CB outcome trial conducted with anti-diabetes drug, be it DPP-4 or SGLT2 or GLP-1, all came either neutral or came positive. Now, so in 2020, even US FDA thought that have we wasted a lot of money while conducting these cardiovascular outcome trials? So they have now changed the goalpost, and now we are not supposed to conduct a mandatory CB outcome trials with newer anti-diabetes drug. They have laid a guideline where you need to include patients who have got a high cardiovascular risk. Certain percentage of patients need to have a chronic kidney disease. Certain percentage of patient has to be elderly population. So basically, you are doing a trial in a mixture of population where patients are elderly, where patient has got a heart disease, where patient has got a renal disease, and then you give either the drug or placebo and show that this is a safe drug. Now, this has been done because of the lesson we learned that despite doing several outcome trials and perhaps exhausting trillions of rupees while conducting these CB outcome trial, we learned less, but we wasted a lot of resources. These
Right.
could have been utilized in the poor patient rather than doing the trial, and that's why the entire world had changed on the the current guidelines of doing the trial. Similarly, in India, your question, in Indian context, they have also changed their module. Similarly, in the the US FDA model, which has been now copied by the European model. So that's why even in the Indian trial, the number of patients population is getting reduced, but then you need to have an elderly population, patients with heart disease and the kidney disease.
Right. So as you have rightly told, more money is spent on clinical trials and the cost goes to the patient. So the drugs become costlier. So if can be standardized, computerized, projected, decisions can be taken, then the drugs can be cheaper in the long run. That is a very important point you stressed, and that is really very important. Our doctors, they are using drugs, different class of drugs, depending on the result of clinical trials and textbook information. Like gliptins came, then SGLT2 came, GLP-1 came. They have many class effects and they have some individual effects. Say SGLT2. How do you differentiate different molecules for clinical use?
Well, so first off, that's a very good question. In fact, so this is always a debate whether these are class effect or this is an individual drug effect. Well, first thing, right? Even a twin brother, from the same father and mother, they are not same. They are similar, but they are not same. Even in I'm talking about a monozygotic twins. How can a pharmaceutical drug would be same in the class when they have got a absolutely different chemical structure? That's a rule number game. So for all practical purpose, all drugs are different and we cannot, claim in the class effect. Although they work in similar fashion, however, they may have different capabilities with regards to the different outcome. Now, when it comes to the glucose lowering abilities, maybe I'm talking about SGLT2 inhibitor because the question is raised about SGLT2 inhibitor. So one can claim that when it comes to the glucose lowering ability or BP reducing ability or weight reducing ability, one can say that this is a class effect and perhaps all the SGLT2 inhibitor reduces HbA1c, BP and body weight similarly. There may be one exception that higher the strength dose of canagliflozin is more powerful because canagliflozin 300 milligram also blocks SGLT1 in intestine. So they are even more powerful than the classical SGLT2 inhibitor. Similarly, SGLT1 and 2 blocker, combined blocker, sotagliflozin, which is not available in India, but they are combined SGLT1 and SGLT2 inhibitor. So they would produce more HbA1c lowering proportionately because of additional SGLT1 blocking ability. So that's a different part of the story. However, when it comes to the SGLT2 inhibitor exclusive, like IMPA, DEPA, CANA, on India, we also have got a remogliflozin. They may be same in glucose control. So I'm not denying that. But they may be different in cardiovascular outcome, not only because they are different by each other, but remember all the trials has been conducted in a different kind of patient. They are not the similar trials, right? So IMPA outcome trial was done in patient with exclusively heart disease, whereas declared TIMI was done having a 70% patients without heart disease. So naturally, outcome is going to be the different in the different outcome trial. Now, when it comes to the class effect, perhaps we may say that, well, it is fine in the glucose control, they all are same, but with regards to the different outcome, there can be a debate. You can say that it is same. You can say no, it is different because different outcome trial has got a different outcome. But at the end of the day, one should realize that these outcome trials has been done in a different population of the patient, not head-to-head trial, so we can't compare it, and we never know whether the drug X, which has been done in the trial A, would have produced the similar result. So that's the tricks in the SGLT2 inhibitor and class effect and the individual effect.
Dr. Singh, very interestingly, you have narrated this. There is another question. For recently few months, now generic drugs of dapagliflozin has come to the market. How do you assess them? They just came from the factory.
Yes. So, so that's a very tempting question. Well, so I believe that if it is a generic dapagliflozin and it's a genuine generic dapagliflozin and has proved bioequivalent data to the regulators, because for the generic drug you don't need to conduct the trial. This is how the rule of games is done in India. In Indian context, the DCGI gave them the approval if the generic drug produces the same bioequivalent data. And this bioequivalence study is done to, this is a pharmacokinetic study to prove that the generic drug has got 80 to 120% bioequivalency to the innovator drug. For the case of dapagliflozin, I am sure the DCGI must have seen this bioequivalent approval data, and once they find that this generic dapagliflozin is as good as the innovator dapagliflozin, then I don't think that this generic dapagliflozin would produce a different result, whether it is a glucose lowering effect or a cardiovascular or renal outcome effect would be different in generic dapagliflozin versus the innovator dapagliflozin. I don't find any difference in the generic dapagliflozin versus the innovator dapagliflozin if DCGI has honestly looked into the bioequivalent data and find that this generic dapagliflozin is as good as innovator dapagliflozin with regards to the bioequivalent.
This is a very, very clear message to our doctor friends that generic dapagliflozin is as good as innovator dapagliflozin approved by Government of India. So here other drugs are there, some trials of glucometers, pumps, and many other technological driven trials are also conducted in diabetes management. And in India, of course, their trial is less, but still there are so many centers who are doing, like Jyoti Dev and others. They are always busy in technically driven programs and all that. So another question, as we are all seniors in the field, but our young friends, those who are now recently starting their career, they are very good, technically very sound, with very high qualification and all, but they are not getting clinical trials much to their satisfaction. And we think the next generation should get it. What do you think? How can they get it?
Yes. Yes. So there are two parts of question. One is that, technological advance in the field of diabetes, it is necessary at this point of time. See, we are in an era where, our patients are also very, very much technically, knowledgeable. I mean, they know how to operate a glucometer, how to look into, data, recorded from the Bluetooth of glucometer to your smartphone and reading their CGMS data. So yes, we do need interventional trials, in the field of diabetes and technology in India, because this is what is the future is looking into. Now we are out of the conventional, fasting, PP, blood, HbA1c era. We are reaching into the era of time in range. So of course, the technology and technological gadget, these kind of trials are necessary in our part of world, and I'm happy that our colleagues are those who are interested in interventional diabetology, I used to say, are doing very great work. Now, when it comes to getting a younger generation with getting the trials, I'm sure younger generations are very much burst with technological advancement, and they are playing with technology. So I would encourage them that they should come forward. They shouldn't get discouraged. Of course, innovator company and those putting money into these kind of trial would like to recall the senior people, those who have done the trial in the past, because there are a lot of nitty-gritties when you are conducting the trial. But I'm sure, sooner or later in the future, they would look into the younger generation, because, the younger generation has got one advantage, that they know technology, they know how to operate these gadgets, and they will be even more quicker than, our senior generations while handling these gadgets and conducting the trials. So don't get discouraged. I'm sure very soon younger generation would get a chance, and they shouldn't be worried at all.
Thank you, Awadhesh. It was a wonderful discussion meeting you, and it is vibrant information from you, where our viewers must be very happy to listen to you. And thank you very much for joining in the NUCD 7th edition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Kanungo. Thank you. My pleasure.